Ankin Ma'at, Ankin Ma'at. I am so pleased that you're here. Welcome to Kemetic Ascension for October 8th, 2023. My name is Jabari Osaze, also known as Heru Jedin Ma'at, Aten Ron, and behind the camera, as you know, or behind the computer is Amika Daniels Osaze, also known as Infra Ma'at. And she is with us today, thankfully, feeling a little bit better. I think the last time we gathered, she wasn't feeling a lot better. She wasn't feeling that great. I'm pleased to have you here to this gathering brought to you by the Shrine of Ma'at. It is amazing that you've chosen to spend part of your Sunday with us. I'm so pleased that you are here. Ankin Ma'at, Ankin Ma'at. You may know that when we start Kemetic Ascension, we always ask for you to tell us where you are. We always ask for you to share with us where in the world you are so we have a better understanding of where our message is reaching. So we always ask for two questions. One, where in the world you are, and two, how long you've been part of Kemetic Ascension. Please let us know that you are out there. Do we have any responses yet?
Yes, we do. We have, I apologize for saying this incorrectly. Iaro Mozaga from Brazil.
Wonderful. I don't think we've heard that name before. It's also why you're wondering whether you're saying it correctly. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm glad that you've chosen to join us.
We have son Brandon Moore, Uncle Ma'at.
Ankin Ma'at, one of our full members, Ankin Ma'at.
Remind us where you're from. We have son Koben Taekwon. See you again.
Ankin Ma'at to you. Send Coben with us again, one of our full members.
We have Sinette Ashley.
Ankin Ma'at out of Houston. Ankin Ma'at, I hope all is well, Sinette, out in Houston.
We have our Jati in the house from the venue.
Ankin Ma'at to send Tehudi Forever, also known as William Humphreys. Ankin Ma'at to you.
We have Hem Netcher Shep Sunk Amen from Washington, D.C.
I wonder, Shep Sunk Amen. That name sounds familiar. Do we know each other? Am I? You have to forgive my aging brain. Ankin Ma'at to you, and I'm glad that you're here from Washington, D.C.
Okay. We have Nyota Nayo. This is from Long Island.
Ankin Ma'at. Did a bird just hit the window? Did you hear that? Ankin Ma'at. I think a bird just hit the window. Ankin Ma'at.
We have Senatan Amun Ra.
Out of Chi-Town, Ankin Ma'at. I hope all is well with you, Senatan, one of our full members.
There's Sen Jason out in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Ankin Ma'at, another one of our full members. Ankin Ma'at to you, Sen. I hope all is well.
We have Lynn Ubuntu out in Hyattsville, Maryland.
Ankin Ma'at, a regular attendee. Ankin Ma'at, I hope all is well with you.
We have Annette Pinson from Memphis, Tennessee.
Ankin Ma'at, Memphis, Tennessee.
We have that couple, Larry and Kenya from Jersey.
Ankin Ma'at, I hope all is well with you. Haven't spoken to you in a minute. I hope all is well. Ankin Ma'at.
We send Nahisi and Sinette Deluise out in Miami, Florida.
Ankin Ma'at, a couple who actually are now full members of the Shrine of Ma'at. They completed their initiation. Ankin Ma'at.
Sen Coben says Flint, Michigan, has been watching for 7 years.
Flint,
just
Michigan.
Shared the book he purchased years ago.
Ankin Ma'at. Wonderful. Flint, Michigan. How is Flint doing these days? I know that you had a major water crisis. I think everyone in the world should know that now. I'm wondering if things have improved.
We have DC Senisi Naka.
Right, that's that. You mentioned him already. Actually, maybe he's on two different. Ankin Ma'at to you.
Nahisi and Deluise.
Yes, Ankin Ma'at.
We have Robert Bunag from Daly City, 10 minutes away from San Francisco.
Ankin Ma'at. Yeah, because I don't know Daly City. Ankin Ma'at.
To learn more about Kemetic spirituality.
Wonderful.
His girlfriend has been watching for about 2 years.
Ankin Ma'at to you.
We have Aset Neturu Gaya from Guyana.
Wow. Are you in Guyana or are you from Guyana? Ankin Ma'at to you. If you are in Guyana, where in Guyana are you? You know that's my maternal homeland. My mother is from Guyana.
We have Abu Jamar in the house.
Ankin Ma'at to Abu Jamar, member of the Wenwet. It's good to know that you're out there. Hope you're doing well out in Strong Island.
That wonderful couple of Schaefers are here with us.
Ankin Ma'at out in Kemet, I believe. I believe they're still there. Ankin Ma'at to you. I hope all is well. I hope that your journeys in Kemet are going well. Ankin Ma'at to you.
We have Jehuti Amun Douglas. His Ren is Jehuti Amen Jed Kara.
Ankin Ma'at, wonderful name. Ankin Ma'at to you.
We have Shane the Watcher 616, Sacramento.
Ankin Ma'at, wondering if he just watched Loki yet. Ankin Ma'at.
We have Sen Daniel LaRoche. His second book is out.
Really? Ankin Ma'at, and congratulations on the second book. Tell us what the topic is. Ankin Ma'at.
Aset Netru Gaya says they're in Guyana.
Wonderful. In Georgetown. Wonderful. Ankin Ma'at. Ankin Ma'at.
We have Abut Sishat in the house.
Ankin Ma'at Abut, one of the members of our Wenwet. Ankin Ma'at to you, Abut Sishat.
We have James Young from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Ankin Ma'at. Ankin Ma'at. Charlotte.
We have PJ out in Houston, Texas.
Clearly, by the way, I should say Guyana is clearly the furthest place we've heard so far. Ankin Ma'at. Where in Texas was that?
Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas. Ankin Ma'at, the same place that Sinette Ashley is. Ankin Ma'at.
We have Ma'atia Set of Udahi, residing in Los Angeles, Atlanta, Baltimore.
Yes, yes, I remember. That's quite a journey. Ankin Ma'at to you. Abadjua. Ankin Ma'at. And we acknowledge that was a Ghanaian name, right? I think we did. Ankin Ma'at.
Shane watches says no, he'll watch it today.
Want to know what you think about Loki. Ankin Ma'at.
We have Sandra Sidra, who says her mom is from Georgetown as well.
Wow.
To go, it's beautiful.
Yes, I haven't been in a long time, since I was a child. And my family seems to go whenever I'm unable to go, which isn't great. But Ankin Ma'at, and hopefully it will be there. I'll go soon. I'm wondering if all of you heard the comment by the Guyanese president, by both the Ghanaian president and the Guyanese president, who are speaking very clearly and forcefully for reparations. Fascinating. And they're talking about those Africans who are in the diaspora, obviously. And I wonder whether the Ghanaian president, the Guyanese president, has African descent. I know he has Indian descent, but if you look at him, you gotta wonder. There might be African in there as well. But definitely they are speaking forcefully about reparations, and it's been fascinating. The Ghanaian president went before the UN and had a very powerful statement in front of Western leaders to their face. And the president of Guyana actually was on a British show where they tried to show him up, and he ran circles around them. It's interesting to see these international leaders talk about these important issues. Ankin Ma'at to you all. Ankin Ma'at.
We have Malachi Sewell. Tell us where you're from. We have Sinette Cheryl out in the DMV.
Ankin Ma'at to you, Malachi, out in where you said? You said you
DMV.
Oh no, I know where she is. You were asking where the other person is, right?
Malachi.
Okay. And Ankin Ma'at to Sinette Cheryl in the DMV area, one of our full members, an active member of the shrine. Ankin Ma'at to you.
Yes, Sinette Sakina right here.
Ankin Ma'at. in North Fork, North Dakota, right? Yes, Ankh and Ma'at. I think it's North Fork. Ankh and Ma'at to you.
We have Jared Williams from Water Valley, Mississippi.
Ankh and Ma'at. Ankh and Ma'at. What'd you say?
A new watcher.
A new watcher. Welcome, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Ankh and Ma'at.
Okay, Sandra says, don't forget about the oil in Georgetown. You can claim ancestry.
What was that?
Says, don't forget about the oil in Georgetown. You can claim ancestry.
There is oil there, but claim ancestry. What do you mean? Is there something I'm not aware of? Guyana actually now has recognized that they have large oil reserves off the coast of its border into the Atlantic Ocean. So that means that into the Caribbean Sea, I guess that is. And it actually means that Guyana may become a very wealthy nation because it seems to be a lot of oil. And of course, they're fighting with Venezuela. Guyana and Venezuela continually have torturous relations. But it's fascinating. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens from here.
We have Kimberly Blue out of DMV.
Ankh and Ma'at to you.
March 2023.
Sanette, Ankh and Ma'at, and welcome again, a relatively new participant, Ankh and Ma'at.
Malachi says they're from the Bronx. Welcome.
Ankh and Ma'at, the BX is right over the bridge, not far from here, walking distance from here. We're in Harlem.
We have James McNair from Saudi Arabia.
Wow, in Saudi Arabia or from Saudi Arabia?
In Saudi.
That is further than Guyana. Ankh and Ma'at to you. Wonderful that you're here with us.
Cara Simpson from Pennsylvania.
Ankh and Ma'at to you. I think we've heard that name before. Ankh and Ma'at, and welcome back.
DZ Ankh out in Buffalo.
Ankh and Ma'at, DZ Ankh, another regular participant in Buffalo. About to get cold in New York and colder in Buffalo, New York. Ankh and Ma'at.
Cara says they're a new participant. That's great.
Wonderful.
I'm sorry if I'm saying this wrong. Elante Williams from Jacksonville, Florida.
Ankh and Ma'at, Jacksonville, Florida. Wonderful. Florida in the house.
Send Cleo here.
Out in Queens, Ankh and Ma'at to you, send Cleo. Hope all is well.
We have Carly Hercules from Georgetown, I believe, right? It says Guyana. So
We got a lot of Guyanese people in here. Ankh and Ma'at, how are you all? My GT family, Ankh and Ma'at.
And that's all we have so far.
Ankh and Ma'at to you all. We're so pleased that you have come to join us for Kemetic Ascension. We know that there are so many things that you could be doing with your Sunday. And so we're honored that you've chosen to spend some of that time with us. We know that as those individuals who hear the call, who hear the voices of our ancient African ancestors, that you are here, we remember. We remember their traditions, we remember their contributions, and we even remember their struggle. So we are honored that you've chosen to be here with us, Ankh and Ma'at. Ankh and Ma'at.
We have two more people who jumped in.
Yes.
Chef Carter from California.
Ankh and Ma'at.
From then till now, out in Toronto, Canada.
That's a new one.
Mm-hmm. And Sanette Tashi is there with us from South Carolina.
Ankh and Ma'at. Ankh and Ma'at.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know. Good to know. Ankh and Ma'at to you all. So with that, I want to once again greet you and welcome you to Kemetic Ascension, the gathering that is brought to you by the Shrine of Ma'at based in Harlem, but with members all over the world. I want to welcome you, and let us begin by saying that we start everything of importance with that ritual that was put into its current form by our elder, Baba Hebrew Ankh Ra Samad Se Patah. Please, we are asking that you join us for this ritual known as the opening of the way. So, as we prepare for the opening, recognize that you must be standing in the position of adoration. That means that you are going to stand with your left foot slightly forward and your right foot slightly back. And then you're going to raise your palms in front of you. With your palms raised, you're going to put the left palm a little bit further forward than the right palm. And the right palm, as we've said, is a little further back, but it can be a little bit lower as well. Don't break your wrist dramatically. We never see people on the walls and in papyrus with their palms breaking their wrists dramatically. If you're going to bend them, bend them ever so slightly. This is known by individuals today as the position of adoration. It's the manner in which our Kemetic ancestors both gave and received divine energy. So, with that, please begin with me as we take a breath from your belly, from your navel. Take the breath from here, not from here, from here. And we're going to chant the word Ankh. As we do the ceremony, if you're unfamiliar, watch us and try to do it with us. At least do the movements and try to say some of the words. You will learn it in short time. Let's begin.
Anetrak in bedhet.
Anetrak in bedhet.
Nuk in bedhet.
Nuk in bedhet. Anetrak hapi.
Anetrak hapi.
Nuk hapi.
Nuk hapi.
Twa winter.
Twa winter. Anetrak serket.
Anetrak serket.
Nuk serket.
Nuk serket. Anetrak keb senu.
Anetrak keb senu.
Nuk keb senu.
Nuk keb senu.
Twa winter.
Twa winter. Anetrak as.
Anetrak ast.
Nuk as.
Nuk ast. Anetrak amset.
Anetrak amset.
Nuk amset.
Nuk amset.
Twa winter.
Twa winter. Anetrak neat.
Anetrak neat.
Nuk neat.
Nuk neat. Anetrak dwamutef.
Anetrak dwamutef.
Nuk dwamutef.
Nuk dwamutef.
Twa winter.
Twa winter. Anetrak newt.
Anetrak newt.
Nuk newt.
Nuk newt. Anetrak geb.
Anetrak geb.
Nuk geb.
Nuk geb.
Twa winter. Anetrak shoe.
Anetrak shoe.
Shoe. Shoe. Shoe. Shoe. Nuk shoe.
Anetrak tefnut.
Anetrak tefnut.
Tefnut.
Tefnut. Tefnut. Tefnut.
Nuk
Nuk tefnut. Twa winter.
Anetrak paut interu.
Anetrak paut interu.
Nuk
Nuk paut
paut
interu. Anetrak and boo interu. Nuk and boo interu. Twa winter. Twa winter. Dwa, dwa, dwa. Dwa to you. Dwa. Dwa for joining us in this sacred ceremony, this sacred ritual that, as I've told you, was put in its current configuration by our elder, Baba Heru Ankh Ra Samaj Sepata. Dwa to you for joining us for this important ritual. We hope that you will do it whenever you are about to do something important. And we always say, your day is the most important thing you should do. Please begin your day with the opening of the way. It will help remind you of just how powerful you actually are. Dwa, dwa, dwa. Okay, so from here, what we usually do is we go into what we call Hesi. Hesi, as you may remember, is, oh, and I should say, I'm looking at some of the activity on Facebook and on YouTube. This is a really good time for you to share this with people you know that should be here, people who also hear the call of their ancient African ancestors. Go ahead and share this with them. So please share this video and also like this video on YouTube so you're able to join in. We hope that you are actually going to continue to support Kemetic Ascension, and this is one of the great ways to do it. Of course, you can always send us stars on Facebook and also send us donations to our Cash App and to our PayPal. This allows us to continue doing this. As one of our priests, one of our Abu of the shrine says, we don't do this for money, but we need money to do it. That is very important because it does cost something to bring this to you. Not money we put in our pockets, but certainly money that we use to produce this so that we're able to be with you bi-weekly. So please support the shrine. So, as I was saying, we're going to go into Hesi. Hesi is the manner in which our ancient African ancestors out of the Hopi Nile Valley region galvanized energy in harmony and song and mantra. The word mantra should actually, from a Kemetic perspective, be Hesi. Hesi is one of the ways that our Kemetic ancestors did these things, one of the ways that they chanted and sang. And it was a very, very important part of Kemetic worship for thousands of years. So today we're going to do a Hesi, one that was mastered by that wonderful couple out of Dodo, Ghana, now in Kemet for some time, the Schaefer's. And they are the ones that put together this amazing Hesi. The Hesi that see, you're looking back too. I keep hearing sounds like people are coming in. Anyway, this Hesi is a Hesi that comes to us from the Shrine of Ptah, our root shrine, the shrine of our origin. And that Hesi is called the Qumran Hesi. Qumran. It is an important Hesi because of its age, and it's something that we truly enjoyed doing for many years. At least members of the temple, the shrine of Ptah enjoyed doing it for many years. I'm going to tell you that I would listen to them do it. I did not know how to do it. And Baba, after many years, would come to us and say, "Why don't we do the Qumran Hesi? Let's go." And he would just do it. And I'd just be looking at him because it's not kind of Hesi that you just learn by listening. But we will talk to you a bit more about the words so that you are able to do it. Please go ahead and enjoy the Qumran Hesi mastered by that couple out of Dodo, Ghana, the Schaefer's. That, as I said, is an oldie but goodie. They sing it a little bit differently than the way we learned it in the Shranapata. There's nothing wrong with that. Baba would say to embrace your creativity, but the way that we learned it was kumra, kumra, kumherura, kumherurera, kumra ra ra ra, kumherura, kumherurera. Now, let me say to you, I know that you're probably saying, how do I learn it by just listening to you? But you have an advantage I did not have in 1997, 1998. You are able to listen to this afterward. When I heard it, trust me, people were just singing it, and the sisters would get up and do these wild, wonderful movements with their lapa, with their cloth on, and the brothers would be doing it in the round, and it was amazing. There'd be drums, but I couldn't listen to it again. It only happened in the room. You have an advantage of playing this back on YouTube, of playing this back on Facebook. So let me say it again. It's called the Qumran Hesi, and essentially it translates something to the mystery of the hidden sun is revealed to my face. That is what the translation is. But you can tell that it really is a Hesi, a mantra, right? It is Hekau. And the way it goes, once again, is Kumra, Kumra, Kumherura, Kumheruherura, Kumra, ra, 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 Kumherura, Kumheruherura. And sometimes what people will do is they'll start later, right? And you could even hear that Sanet Kenya did something amazing. That's exactly what used to happen in the shrine. Did you hear how she started to sing Kura Herura? It's how it sounds like it should go. She wasn't there in the Shrine of Ptah hearing it happen, but because of her musical sensibilities, because of Brother Charles' musical sensibilities, they could hear, this is how you make this live. That's exactly what happened in the Shrine of Ptah. And I'm sure that Baba would smile knowing that when they heard it, they actually had the same musical inclinations as people with talent, as he did, as he has talent. Brother Jabari has been given lots of talents. Musical talents was not among them. And you laugh before I finish the sentence because she knew what I was going to say. Musical talents is not among them. It just isn't. It isn't. So I want you to know that it is amazing. It's a wonderful Hesi. You could just sing it forever. I mean, it could be on loop for 24 hours. And doing it with people is a lot of fun as well. So enjoy that Hesi. Please let that Hesi live. Continue to call upon it. Continue to use it. Okay? It's the kind of Hesi you could sing while you're washing the dishes. The kind of Hesi that you could sing while you're walking to work. The kind of Hesi you could sing in ceremony. It will meet your needs wherever you are. That's the reason why we try to bring Hesi to these gatherings, and it's really important. Okay. So at this point, what I'd like to do is go through what we call a word from the Sebayit. And I just want to remind you that the Sebayit, particularly, is the wisdom literature of ancient Kemet. The wisdom literature of ancient Kemet. And as we are talking about the Sebayit, I want to revisit something that we talked about several years ago, as I asked for the shrine and all who could hear my voice to engage in a boycott of Popeyes. Now, I'm not saying that Popeyes knows about our request for a boycott, but you know that we're in the Halloween period, right? For several subsequent years, they had their voodoo chicken. I have not seen them put forward voodoo chicken this year. It is likely that they became aware of some of the calls to boycott them and decided this year not to bring it forward again. So I want you to check out Popeyes and see if you see it. We are certainly in the Halloween period. You can't go to Target. You can't go to Home Depot. You can't go to, I don't know, where else would you go? You can't go to BJ's or to Costco and not see all of the Halloween displays up. In fact, I was just in Home Depot with my mother on Friday. We saw Halloween and Christmas together. And she said, boy, somebody's mind is racing looking at a white Santa Claus, a Tom Who Santa Claus next to a scarecrow. And I said, Mom, you do not want to get me started. And she looked at me and she said, no, I don't want to get you started. Because of course, I would have said to her that both of these holidays are ridiculous, ethnocentric holidays that neither should exist. I'm not begrudging people who do these things with their family. I'm not saying that you should become so ostracized from your family that you don't do anything that they do in when they're having fun. But I am saying that we have to get to a point where we have replaced these bastard holidays with celebrations that would make our ancestors sing. And Christmas and Halloween are not celebrations that our ancestors would engage in. One of them is in many ways an echo of what Africans did thousands of years before there was a Greece or Rome. And the other is one that pretends that we should be afraid of our ancestors, so in fear of our ancestors that we should disguise ourselves in our homes. Because on this day, the day of All Hallows Eve, or All Saints Day, the barrier between the world of those who have died and those who are still living is so thin that they can be pierced, that some of those ancestors might find their ways on our plane and return home. And so what do the Tom Who do? They say, let's disguise our homes and ourselves so that when grandpa comes back, he stays away because he is a ghost. He is dead and he should not be here. Is that something that Africans would do? Well, I'm going to tell you, even the brothers on the corner on Friday night would disagree with that because they pour little out for the brothers who aren't here every time that they share their spirits. Because Africans look for deep and lasting relationships with their ancestors. This is not something that the youngest people on the planet were able to understand. And so some of their ceremonies, some of their rituals, some of their holidays, I would argue, are in stark contrast, in violation to those ancient ancestral laws. That's my 2 cents on this particular issue. That's exactly what my mother did not want to get me started on. And so you've heard it. But today I want to talk to you about this attack on African tradition and spirituality, particularly also because something occurred, something happened, something went viral this week that I think we need to be aware of, that once again speaks ill of these African traditions, that says that all people in the world should be following this Tom Who Christ, that Africans are better for being Christian today. I want you to hear the words of this reverend out of Georgia. So what we're going to do is I want us to hear, I don't know why, okay, there it is. I want us to hear his words. His name is Devin Rogers. He's out of Georgia, and the lecture he was doing is called Christian Privilege. Christian Privilege. And what I want you to recognize is he says a lot of things that we ought to be concerned about. He says a lot of things that we ought to be concerned about. I want you to hear his words, to hear the problematic concepts he has. And I'm going to tell you, if you were in Georgia, you should ensure that this kind of claptrap doesn't continue to be spoken in public. He should actually pay a price for these words. We should ensure that people in our community have a better orientation to the Ma'afa, to our enslavement. Take a listen to what he said.
They got the gospel and they got it. You know what? I bet there's a lot of Africans that haven't been brought over. Not saying it was right. Don't misunderstand. Not justifying slavery situation. But for God, I still believe used it. And now I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that got the gospel and they're in heaven right now because they got the gospel. You know, what would be better?
It's not loud enough.
They're saying it's not loud enough?
Mm-hmm. One moment.
I don't know why it's not. I think you're moving it too. Try it like that for now.
Why
don't you start over?
I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that were brought over into slavery, which wasn't right, but they got the gospel and they got it. You know what? I think there's a lot of Africans that they haven't been brought over. I'm not saying it was right.
Oh, yes, it did.
Slavery situation. But God, I still believe used it.
I'm at an awkward
And now I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that got the gospel and they're in heaven right now because they got the gospel. You know, what would be better? For them to have lived their entire life in Africa, doing their duty, or whatever, and then dying and going to hell, right? Or what happened? And then they go to heaven and get the opportunity. Now, again, it doesn't justify. He's not justifying the means, but this is how God works. This is what God does in life. And we have black people here. I don't think you guys are ever slaves. You know, I was never a slave. Like, oh, you know what privilege? You were never a slave. You were never living during the time, you know, unless you're very old, like 60 or 70 maybe, or 80 years old. You're never.
Please let us know if you can hear that. We'll play it one other way.
I mean, what are you crying about? Nothing even happened to you. You're making up stuff. You can't look at the facts that I was saying and just attribute that to some kind of white privilege. It's not real. Get over it. Quit having all the excuses. Why don't you take some responsibility for your choices? Be content with whatever situation you were born into and make the most of it. God's not limited. You won't know what we have.
I don't know if you were able to hear that. What we'll do is we'll play it in the room from the speaker where I am, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it a little bit better. Did they say anything? They heard that?
The volume is very low, but
Okay, we're going to play it again.
It's
only a minute and a half. Listen to it here, okay? Take a listen.
I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that were brought over into slavery, which wasn't right, but they got the gospel when they got here. And you know what? I bet you there's a lot of Africans that if they hadn't been brought over, not saying it was right, don't misunderstand, not justifying the slavery in the situation, but God, I still believe used it. And now I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that got the gospel and they're in heaven right now because they got the gospel. You know, what would be better? For them to have lived their entire life in Africa free, doing their voodoo or whatever, and then dying and going to hell, right? Or what happened? And then they go to heaven. They get the opportunity. Now, again, it doesn't justify it. The ends do not justify the means, but this is how God works. This is what God does in the Bible. And we have black people here. I don't think any of you guys were ever slaves. You know, I was never a slave. like, white privilege. You were never a slave. You were never living during the time, unless you're very old, like 60 or 70 maybe, or 80 years old, you're never even living during a time where segregation was a thing in this country. I mean, what are you crying about? Nothing even happened to you. You're just making up stuff. You can't look at the facts that I was reading and just attribute that to some kind of white privilege. It's not real. Get over it. Quit having all the excuses. Why don't you take some responsibility for your choices? Be content with whatever situation you were born into and make the most of it. God's not limited to your situation. He can do above, what we ask or think.
I want you to listen to what Devin Rogers said. And there's so many problematic things about this. He's saying that we should recognize that enslavement must have been wrong. He tries to impute. And he's not justifying it, but just think, Africans were brought over here and they got the gospel. And because they got the gospel, now they can go to heaven. That's what he's saying. Because if not, what would you be doing? Practicing your voodoo or whatever. This is so extremely racist. And I want to say it's mixed into the traditions of Christianity. He calls this lecture Christian privilege. He might as well say let's call it white Christian privilege. That we should actually say, well, we were enslaved and we were met with horrors and our mothers were raped and children were killed and then there were lynchings and all of these things occurred, but we now can at least get on our knees and praise white Jesus. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. Because of course, everyone who is not Christian is going to hell. Everyone that's not Christian is going to hell. That's his concept. A tradition, which is a poor copy of an ancient African tradition. But if you are not Christian, you are going to hell. What kind of capricious deity are you worshiping? Are you saying that because you were born someplace on the continent of Africa, by the way, the continent of Africa, I don't think there is a place where individuals have not actually had access to Christianity, unfortunately. But let's say you did grow up in a really rural area of Africa and you weren't aware of Christianity. And it's just, I don't know, you and your husband, you and your wife and your kids, and you're working and living and happy there and doing well by your family and well by your neighbors and trying to assist people who are in need. You will go to hell. What kind of FOMO does God have? I guess we should have fear of missing out, right? This is ridiculous and it's racist. It's racist. I mean, imagine this tradition begins in an area much closer to the continent of Africa, even if you're just looking at its European reality. If we're talking about the things that happen in the Levant, it's closer to the continent of Africa than to the continent of North America. But I guess it's good that we were enslaved because now we have the gospel. And he literally points at black folks that are in the office, Africans that are in that space with him. And he says, you were never a slave. I wasn't a slave. Unless you were very old, you don't even know segregation. I'd love for you to look at the mother of Trayvon Martin and say that. I'd love for you to look at the sister of Tamir Rice and say that. I'd love for you to acknowledge that this country, while supposedly segregation is legally abhorred, we should recognize that the situations that people of African descent meet themselves in today is not one that is equitable. But he says you're making it up. So this is more than just an attack on African spirituality. Devin Rogers has some real sick ideas in his head. And the thing is this, I almost don't even want to put it on him. You've heard this before, haven't you? I know I have. I've even heard it from black folk, from people of African descent that, well, it was pretty bad what happened to us, but at least we get to be here in the United States. As if the absolutely painful, inhumane situation that we experienced was our payment for the journey. In a country that we built. What did you pay, Devin Rogers? What did your family pay to be here in this country that you think is so amazing? Holding a Bible that you think is redemptive. What was the cost that you paid, that your family paid? These are the challenges that we see before us very often when we hear individuals talk about Christianity. And this concept that African traditions are inherently evil, this is not new. I want you to hear, this is when Jabari was a kid. And I remember George W. Bush. Actually, no, I'm sorry, not George W. Bush. George H.W., Herbert Walker Bush, his father, arguing about the economic policies of other Republicans and calling them voodoo economics. Look at the screen. The commentator doesn't say voodoo or Voldoon is an African tradition and we actually don't agree with the use of the word. He thinks that there's nothing wrong with using that term. His disagreement might be with the policy itself, not with the fact that it speaks of an African tradition negatively. Take a listen to this news report. This is the kind of thing that I grew up hearing. I'm not going to just leave you in the 80s and 90s, though. We're going to bring it forward. Take a listen.
Voodoo economics. That's how candidate George Bush described candidate Ronald Reagan's policy during the 1980 presidential primaries. Mr. Reagan is now Vice President Bush's boss, and the phrase is something of an embarrassment. In fact, Bush said this week he never said it, but the record rather vividly proves otherwise. Ken Bodie has the story.
It's commonly believed that back in the Republican primaries of 1980, candidate George Bush referred to Ronald Reagan's economic plans as voodoo economics. Last night, Vice President Bush was asked about that and corrected the record.
Well, what I said back then, it's very hard to find. Actually, let me start over. One, I didn't say it. Nobody, every network's looked for it and none can find it. It was never said. I challenge anybody to find it.
Challenge accepted. Let's go back to Carnegie Mellon University, Pittsburgh, April 10th, 1980, George Bush.
So what I'm saying is that it just isn't going to work. And it's very interesting that the man who invested this type of what I call a voodoo economic policy.
What was that again?
What I call a voodoo economic policy.
In this day and age, you simply can't go back and correct the record. Somebody's bound to have the tapes. This afternoon, the Vice President's office corrected the record one more time. Last night in Houston, they said the Vice President was only kidding. Ken Bodie, NBC News, Washington.
Well, that's nightly news for this evening. I'm John Chancellor. Good night for NBC News.
Now, I want you to think about that. He said something so ridiculous and he challenged people to find it. By the way, you should know, this is a long time ago. He would never have said something like that today because before he got off of the stage, there would have been people tweeting. There would have been people posting to Facebook and to YouTube. Would have been putting up things on TikTok and on Instagram. But he thought he could get away with it because of the age that he was in. Because technology and communications actually hadn't gotten to the point where we are now. But recognize that no one is talking about the term that he used. They're talking about whether he called his opponent's economic policies ridiculous and that they're not going to work. They don't think that the word voodoo being used in that manner is racist, is ethnocentric, is intolerant. Not one of them had a comment about that. And I also want to say that we see this very often. Do you remember Annie from Popeyes? Doesn't Popeyes already do enough that they should have left insulting people around voodoo alone. Do you remember Annie? I don't think we see her much anymore, but she was supposed to be, you know, the woman in the kitchen that was making Popeye's chicken. Popeye's chicken, I believe, comes from New Jersey. When they say love that chicken from Popeyes, clearly they're using a black aesthetic, black voices, a black musical tenor to be able to advertise their company, which is not black owned, which does not have major black shareholders. But they're trying to draw from black culture. And in drawing from black Southern culture and having this woman in the kitchen cooking chicken for you, you know where they're going. They thought that they could bring in a new millennial mammy character and that you would not recognize. That's what they did. How different is she from this image? Lossy. Folks show cheer for fluffy, energizing Aunt Jemima pancakes. Is she that different? Or is this a modernization? There's no head handkerchief. I mean, Annie got a perm. So she's supposed to be a modern character. I mean, isn't that what we're seeing here?
Popeyes and Voodoo Tenders disappear.
And take a look at their Voodoo Tenders commercial. I'm going to turn this one down. Please let us know if you're able to hear the videos.
Popeyes and Voodoo Tenders disappear.
I couldn't help that. No.
Go back, you're too far.
Popeyes and Voodoo Tenders disappear frighteningly fast. 3 tenders and a sweet chili sauce plus a side of a biscuit for $5. That's so scary good. They should be called Voodoo Tenders. Sorry.
Did you hear him say Voodoo Tenders? And look at the logo. Do you notice that the line under the 2 O's looks like there are X's on it? What is that supposed to be? That's supposed to be how a quote-unquote voodoo doll looks. A major American company clearly insulted people of African descent. And regardless of what you feel about voodoo, I don't think that you should insult someone's spiritual tradition. Why should they do that? I think that this is inappropriate. I don't think that McDonald's should market, I don't know, Thorny Crown chicken nuggets and make the chicken nugget look like someone who's in pain and have, I don't know, some cilantro wrapped around it like the crown. McDonald's wouldn't do that because they would be afraid to offend people who are Christians and others who have good sense. But when people actually speak ill of African traditions, what do people do? Not a damn thing. I'm not a voodoo practitioner. I'm a practitioner of the Kemetic tradition. But I know that they don't have to call my name personally to be insulting me. This is something that Devin Rogers would have felt comfortable with. We're going to go past this next video. This is just a commentator talking about him tasting voodoo chicken. But I want to go on here to a scene that was in The Big Bang Theory. Now, of course, I can't play the scene because you know that we'd get bumped on YouTube and Facebook, and we should not. Because we are critiquing it, it does not violate copyright laws. But Facebook and YouTube would still just bump us anyway. But here is a bit of the dialogue that comes from season 3, episode 12, called The Psychic Vortex from The Big Bang Theory, which at the time, by the way, was the highest rated comedy on television. It still is so highly rated that it's in syndication on at least 2 or 3 major channels. It's on every day of the week. And I can say I watched it regularly. When I saw this, I was horrified. In this discussion, Leonard, the guy all the way on the right, whose girlfriend is Penny, the blonde girl sitting on the couch on the left, he's actually speaking about the fact that he makes fun of some of the things that she thinks are important or even real or valid. And he says at one point, really, that's the line? Psychics are real, but crystals are voodoo? Because he's saying to her that she says that she doesn't believe in crystals, they don't work. And her response is, oh, voodoo is real. You don't want to mess with voodoo. And then the audience laughs. Did CBS suffer any consequences for this series of dialogue, this set of dialogue? What if he was saying, oh, that's the line? Psychics are real, but the resurrection of Jesus, that's the part where you don't believe things. And she'd say, oh no, I believe I believe in psychics, but nobody believes that that guy woke up from the dead 3 days later with some holes in his hands. Would everyone laugh, or would the show get canceled? Would there be a major boycott? Why is it that no one speaks up when it comes to African traditions? We have to understand this in its larger reality as well. We should recognize that Christianity, these are some of the major misconceptions that we'll hear from people, because we want to talk to you about, I want to talk to you about the fact that world spirituality is now under the control of European culture. So here are some of the major misconceptions you will hear. Christianity is an African tradition. Take a look at this black Jesus with the locks on the left. And I know that my family warmly held the African Heritage Study Bible and the Africa Study Bible and all these things, because they actually don't have any question whatsoever of one consonant or vowel in the text that they've gotten. All they want to do is change how Jesus looks. And this is not a critique of my personal family. You know that most people are like that. They say, oh my goodness, these people want to make Jesus white. And then you say, well, these same people who have bleached your tradition, you don't think that they did anything to the text? You don't think that their selection or their authoring of some of its books would be problematic to Africans? All they did is painted him peach instead of brown. That's the problem. And they would actually probably say to you, you know what? They probably did some other things too. Challenge them. Challenge them to find one sentence in that entire book that they disagree with, that would have been manipulated or even wrongfully authored by the Talmud. And you'll see how quick they backtrack. They return home faster than a child needing to use the bathroom after school. I'm telling you that that's what they're going to do. Here's some other misconceptions. Islam and Judaism are the black man's original tradition. You'll hear those too. When I was a young person coming out of Christianity, questioning my Christian faith, I remember people telling me Islam is the black man's true religion. Of course, just a few short years later, when I began to truly understand world history, I was so confused. I said, well, how could they say that? This information is very clear. In fact, Islam comes into the world after Christianity, which comes into the world after Judaism, and we know what period of world history they come into prominence. Well, what were Africans doing for the tens of thousands of years before that? What were they doing? Even those comments are ethnocentric and anti-African. That's the problem that we have. We also hear people say the spiritual forms of ancient Africa simply died out. They died, so I guess we're not going to practice those. Let's just find an Abrahamic tradition. Another major misconception that needs to be debunked is that we should understand or agree with these messages that are prevalent in American culture that argue that modern African traditions are childish, foolish, or dangerous and evil at worst. We also hear that Christianity has or is continuing to civilize both continental and diasporan Africans. That's what Devin Rogers is saying, practicing, I don't know what, their voodoo. That Christianity has a civilizing reality that we must face. And we should know that those Christians, those early Christians on the continent, were extremely damaging of the earlier traditions. Look at this image taken with my own camera, my own picture from the temple today known as Philae. Look at how many strikes, chisel strikes, there would have needed to be to destroy the image of Ast and the image of the king. You see how many individual strikes there are? And look at how deeply they carved that Coptic church, that Coptic cross, because they were then going to use this space to practice Christianity, to worship Jesus. This is the reality is here. We are actually seeing the destruction of these traditions. If you look a little further up toward the top of the image, you'll even see that there is some Coptic written there. That these individuals defaced and destroyed an ancient African tradition at any moment, any opportunity that was presented to them. This is what actually happened. This is the story that most people are unaware of. That these traditions that are prominent today were destructive of the ancient traditions that your ancestors practiced. And now they want you to believe that practicing those Western traditions are the only way that you will meet the afterlife, a concept that they got from Africa. Why someone ought to take Devin Rogers out to the woodshed. This is what needs to happen. Look at these images. Here's a book, Voodoo Anyone? How to Understand Economics Without Really Trying by Christopher Warden. By the way, that book is still for sale. I haven't seen anyone challenge Christopher Warden on his title other than me, by the way. I challenged him on his title. I wrote him an email, no response. It's a reference to voodoo economics, that term that George H.W. Bush used. Why is it that Africans are so under the thumb, so under the boot of white supremacy that they don't even see that they're being spit on? How about Voodoo Donut? Voodoo Donut is from Louisiana. Do you know their stores are still humming along strong? Look at their sign. That's supposed to be a chocolate eclair with a little stick in it. It's supposed to be a voodoo doll. They actually sell it. Who's arguing with them that that's racist, xenophobic, and intolerant of someone's spiritual tradition? You don't need to be a member of that tradition in order to see that this is inappropriate. They're still going strong, selling on the internet. Look at their donut. By the way, they even made the donut chocolate. They telling you this is about Black people. What has happened? Nothing. I mean, if you look at the way the lips and the teeth are made, it looks almost like a coon figure to me. You mean they could get away with a coon figure as a donut in modern Louisiana and not anybody argue with them? Is this okay? This is where we're at now, huh? This is where we're at after George Floyd, after the racial justice movements of 2020. Still, this company gets to go along with no recompense. There is no punishment, no sanction that they are meted out. Take a look at this article. This comes from the New York Times in 2011. Voodoo and Anchor rises again, and it describes a Vodun celebration that was occurring in Brooklyn. Look at those people's faces. Look at the voodoo practitioners on the left. Look at them. Do they not look like they are taking their tradition seriously? Do they not look like they are embracing themselves as people of African descent? Do they look like you should make fun of them? Be derisive of their traditions? By the way, where are they even arguing with these companies? Because when I speak to practitioners of Vodun, they want to be quiet about their tradition. And they don't, and I understand why they want to be quiet. I get that. But I'm saying, shouldn't they even say something about the negative image that is being bandied about in Western culture? Where are their activists? I don't even know how to begin this. I think this is one of those things where perhaps Jabari is an old radical, and I'm still radical, and so I'm upset when I see Black people offended, when I see African culture derided. Maybe it's my old roots, but I just don't get it. I don't know why we would allow this to continue. Listen for a minute at the Greek philosopher who lives in the 5th century BCE, before the Common Era. Listen to how he describes the first Greek person to be admitted into the Kemetic temple. This is from his book Timaeus, and I think it's fascinating for us to recognize that the Greeks realized that these African traditions were ancient and that theirs were new. Listen to what he writes. He says, Solon said that he traveled to Kemet, where he was held in great esteem amongst them. Moreover, when he was questioned, such of their priests as were the most versed in ancient lore about their early history, he discovered that neither himself nor any other Greek knew anything at all. Did you hear what he said? He discovered that neither himself nor any other Greek knew anything at all. When he wished to draw them on to discourse on ancient history, one of the priests, a prodigiously old man, said, oh, Solon, you Greeks are always children. There is not such a thing as an old Greek. And on hearing this, he asked, what do you mean by this saying? And the priest replied, you are young in soul, every one of you, for therein you possess not a single belief that is ancient or derived from old tradition, nor yet one science that is hoary with age. This is what the greatest of Greek philosophers says about their traditions. But when you go to a post office, a bank today, you're going to be looking at a Greco-Roman temple. That's the design that they've given them. Because in fact, what they have done is they have usurped the position of Africa in the understanding of the development of human civilization. Now that is someone in a temple. He's talking about spirituality as well. Listen to what Herodotus says. Herodotus is a Greek historian. Many people believe that many Europeans argue that he's the father of history. I would never say that because he's so new on the stage. But listen to what he says about the ancient Kemetic people. And this is called An Account of Egypt. He says, moreover, it is true also that the Egyptians were the first of men who made solemn assemblies and processions and approaches to the temples. And from them, the Hellenes, the Greeks, have learnt them. And my evidence for this is that the Egyptian celebrations of these have been held from a very ancient time. whereas the Hellenic were introduced but lately. The Egyptians hold their solemn assemblies not once in the year, but often, especially and with the greatest zeal and devotion. This is what the early Europeans are telling us about the African world that they had interaction with. The African world that was actually spurting on, in many ways, its last legs of world prominence. But they recognized that these traditions were the most ancient and the most solemn. That's what they're saying to you. What about Homer? Homer is sometimes believed to actually have been an African. There are some that argue that he may have been, but he's the person that writes the first Western book, the two first books, the Odyssey and the Iliad. Listen to what he says. This is Thetis speaking to Achilles. He says, "Only yesterday Zeus went off to the ocean river to feast with the Ethiopians, loyal, lordly men, and all of the gods went with him." Zeus goes to dine with the Africans. That's what Homer says in the Iliad. How did we get this so confused? How did we get this so juxtaposed? How do we now hear people regularly deride the African traditions when the early Greeks who they revere told us that the African traditions were the basis of human society? You can speak ill of Vodun and any other tradition you like with impunity. We must take a stand. If you, in fact, are a practitioner of African traditions, you must take a stand. We cannot allow this to continue. I know that one of the movies that I enjoyed when I was much younger, and I'm not talking about the new version, but the older one, was called Clash of the Titans. Clash of the Titans. And it was a story that talked about Perseus and Andromeda. It's based on Greek myth. And I'm going to tell you that as we see the renditions of Cassiopeia and Andromeda in these films, we see what are meant to be attractive white women, attractive Tamil women. But you should know that the Greeks named these two ladies, Cassiopeia and Andromeda, mother and daughter, after African women. They're supposed to be the queens of Ethiopia. Why is it that their images have been hidden? Why is it that their images have been hidden? Take a look at this old etching. Can you tell that she is depicted as dark in comparison with the others? Look at her depiction in comparison to this little European angel next to her, as you see Perseus fighting the Kraken on the other side. Can you tell that she is meant to be depicted with dark skin? How does this image become those images? If it was not for the fact that a great crime has occurred, identity theft of the highest order has occurred. And now all we hear is that those things created in Africa are childish, are brutish, are evil. And we even have Africans who believe that. How did this happen? What must we do? These are the traditions that were the most ancient in the world. We see Asar sitting with his wife Ast and their child Heru. These are the world's most ancient traditions. And you should know that this process of usurpation occurred at a time when all in the known world knew that Kemet was one of the most powerful nations for several millennia, and its spiritual cosmogony had influenced all of the traditions in the entire region, in the entire Mediterranean region, including where these three major traditions today had their origin. Should we be surprised that they did not borrow heavily from the Africans, who were doing this thing for tens of thousands of years before there was a European of note? Should we be surprised? I would argue no. I would argue no. And so what happens is the mystery traditions of the rest of the Mediterranean are nothing more than remixed versions of the Kemetic tradition. And as they were remixed, they would eventually look like the people who were remixing them. They would eventually look like the Tamhu, the European. Here's something else that Herodotus says. He says Melampos was the one who taught the Greeks the name of Dionysus. It was from him that the Greeks learned to bear the phallus along in honor of Dionysus. I will not say that what is done in Egypt in connection with the god and what is done among the Greeks originated independently. For then be of a Hellenic character and not recently introduced. In other words, the Greeks began to take things from Kemet. And you should know that when Herodotus is mentioning Dionysus, he believes that he's talking about Asar. We don't have any record of Kemetic priests just walking with their penis out. This is what the youngest people in the world did as they took from these African traditions. Are you saying what? I'm sorry.
Yeah, men.
Yes, but I said priest. We don't have priests walking with their. Yes, Anika's saying men. I wasn't sure what she was mouthing to me back there. But Africans did not have a problem with the human body. We did not think that any part of our body was evil. We did not. In fact, if you read the Reyu Pertum Ruengare, it will tell you that every single part of your body is divine. It's the Europeans, the youngest people on the planet, the Tamhu, that begins to look at it in this manner. But their father of history is telling us that those traditions came from Africa. This is what a little bit later, Diodorus Siculus in his Library of History says, there is only difference in names between the festivals of Bacchus and those of Osiris, between the mysteries of Isis and those of Demeter. In other words, that's where we got them from. That's what he's saying. And then Plutarch, saying this a little bit later, says, it is proper to identify Osiris with Dionysus. You should recognize that we're talking about an African story. Look at us sitting here in glory with Heru. And she becomes this. This statue is known as As Aphrodite. It is in the Metropolitan Museum, but there are many of them around the world. This is probably the most prominent of them. Take a look at her. She's clearly a Tamhu, a woman of European descent, and on her cornucopia crown, can you not see the sun-distant horns of As or Het Heru? Notice that she even has braided hair, because they're trying to say that this Tamhu woman is actually Ast. And they recognize that the first images of Ast would have been of women of African descent. So they have remixed her. They've appropriated her culturally. That's what they have done. And then after the fall of Kemet, we see that totemly, I want you to look at Asar through a different lens, that Ptolemy, the first Soter, by the way, Soter means savior, the Greek king of Kemet, after Kemet falls, he tries to calm fights between the Jews, the Greeks, and the native Kamites in Alexandria. So he creates his own deity known as Serapis. It comes from Asar plus Apis, and the Apis bull, and uses Greek imagery. That's how he gets Serapis. Take a look at Serapis. What does Roman Emperor Hadrian say about Serapis? He says, those who worship Serapis are Christians, and those who call themselves the bishops of Christ. At least the Roman Emperor Hadrian believes that these folks are worshiping the same person. Look at Serapis. Here's another image of Serapis. By the way, the Greeks would then call him the Good Shepherd. They would call him the sacrificial bull. Of course, Jesus is known as the sacrificial lamb. He was symbolically sacrificed for our sins annually, and the temple known as the Serapeum was the temple for Serapis. The destruction of the Serapeum in 391 by the Christian bishop of Alexandria named Theophilus was seen by ancient writers as the final victory of the Christians over the old quote-unquote pagan traditions. I want us to recognize that as we look at these traditions, we are actually looking at how Europe usurped these values. And when you go to even Washington, D.C., a city that seems to have so much reverence for Greece and Rome, if you look closely, you will see Kemet. Take a look at Meridian Hill Park and its cascading basin. I'm not going to talk about this in great detail. But if you look at its cascading basin waterfall pools, you will see that there is an Ankh hidden there. And if you look at the House of the Temple at the Scottish Rite headquarters, just a few blocks away, you're going to see a Mer or Merkut on the top. And in front, you will see the statue that the Greeks ended up calling the Sphinx, that we call the Heteromachian. When you look at the Abraham Lincoln Memorial, you can clearly see that it draws influence from the Ramesseum. I'm sorry, it's from the temple known as Ramesses Mariamun in Kemet. That temple all the way in Kemetic Nubia, all the way south, that Anika and I have the honor of seeing every year. And clearly, when you look at images of George Washington in ceremony, you are seeing that in his understanding, his Masonic understanding, they are attempting to imitate your Kemetic ancestors. Do you not see that he is standing in an altered version of the position of adoration that you do, practitioner, today? That his clothing is meant to be evocative of ancient Kemetic clothing. This is what we are dealing with. And this is why we must push back against Popeyes and push back against Voodoo Donut. By the way, I took this image today from their website. We must push back. We cannot continue to allow, post office, we cannot continue to allow these individuals to insult African traditions. This is of critical importance, and we must get to the point where we are fighting, where we are no longer allowing people to speak ill of African traditions. Look at these images on their box that says good things come in pink boxes. Can you see that person with the skull and the top hat? That is clearly a reference to a deity in the Vodun tradition. Which one? Why don't you tell me who that is a reference to? Who are they trying to imitate? So I want you to know that this is not, they're not just using the term voodoo liberally and without any understanding. They actually have looked at modern practitioners. For them to make a joke out of this person with a skull and a top hat, they are referencing an image that is important to modern practitioners. They are paying attention to you, African, and insulting you and spitting at you. What are we going to do? I have to say to you folks, often, because I am a Kemetic priest and one who is stridently in opposition to attacks on our traditions, to attacks on our ancestors. I'm often out front. And sometimes people even say to me, why are you fighting? Ignore them. How long are we going to ignore offense? Would any other group do that? Why do you think that ignoring these things continually works? Because what ends up happening is other Africans who have not had the opportunity of learning the things that you have actually assume that what they're hearing must be correct. No one's arguing with them. No one said anything to George Herbert Walker Bush. No one, as far as I'm aware, organized any large public opposition to Popeye's chicken. I said something. They ignored me. They didn't even respond. No one said anything when Whole Foods had their voodoo line of products. I did. I didn't hear anyone else. When are we gonna stand up for our ancestors? Maybe the reason why we keep catching hell is because we've forsaken our ancestors. Isn't it time for us to protect their names and their traditions? When are we going to rise up and do this? The Kemetic tradition can't just be for you. Being a practitioner of the elder African tradition means that you have responsibilities as well. I'm hoping that this discussion will embolden you to speak up, that we will no longer be closeted Kamites, that we will no longer hide our African spirituality and pretend that we're doing what everyone else is doing. It's time for us to stand. It's time for us to reclaim the names of our ancestors. With that, let me say the divine force in me greets the divine force in you. I'm hoping that you got a lot out of this discussion and will continue to speak as a shrine about these issues as we move. Other questions, comments, Anika? It's very quiet.
No, there's a lot going on. Brother Godfrey Kwesi Danzo says that he is watching from Ghana and that it's a shame that Ghanaians look down on our tradition because we were colonized by the British. Oh goodness.
It's a lot. There's that much?
It's a lot. I mean, it's, people are outraged about what they've seen.
Yeah. Perhaps outrage is the first step. And the next step needs to be action, and we need to do some more work.
Let's see. Could you kind of explain the emergence of the Tombu? What did the Africans mean when they said the white people were created? How were they created?
I don't think that I have seen anywhere that Africans said that the Tombu was created. I've not seen that. The only time I've ever heard that is in something that Elijah Muhammad said, and it might have even come from Warith Deen, not from Fard Muhammad. And so I've not read that in any of the ancient texts that Africans said they were created. I think that's part of the Nation of Islam's folklore, to be honest. I believe that the Tombu are our children, wayward children, but they're individuals who are outside of the continent of Africa long enough that their phenotype, that the way that they look, changed radically. And that's the narrative that I think we should recognize scientifically and also in terms of what actually occurred. Are there other questions or comments? Feel free to email me if you have comments about this discussion, by the way, at Jed, D-J-E-D, D-J-E-D, like David, John, Edward, David. I hate to just use your European names to describe it. But D-J-E-D at Shrine of Ma'at, M-A-A-T is how you spell Ma'at. You should know how Ma'at is spelled because you're looking at the Shrine of Ma'at's platform on YouTube and on Facebook. shrineofma'at.org. You can email me there if you have additional questions. And hopefully we'll do something, and we won't just stand aside quietly as European society continues to say that African society is beyond reproach, that African society is primitive or childish. We need to stand for our ancestors.
So Brother Kwesi says there's a protest in Ghana now because politicians are using taxpayer funds to build a national cathedral while the states stay impoverished, rich in gold.
Could you please send me a link to that? I'd love to know more about it. I'm not aware of that particular protest. I'd love to know more.
Another question: what did Africans believe about the origins of white people?
I don't think I have never read anything that says that white people are not different. That Africans are, that Europeans are not our children that look different because of where they are. I've not seen anything that says that they're not human or something like that, or they came up in some unusual way. I've not seen anything that where Africans describe the origins of white people in that way. I've never seen that. And if you have, I'd love for you to share it. But I don't, as I'm a historian, I spend a lot of time reading this stuff. I haven't come across anything in my studies other than what we hear from the Nation of Islam. That's it. And I don't think that's a historical analysis. I think that's just a story that they were told in order to, and it was told for a good reason. It was supposed to demystify whiteness. That's what they were doing. I understand what the Nation of Islam was doing. They were trying to demystify whiteness so you could stand up like a human being and push back. That's why they did that, but it's not a historical story. Okay? Is everything Nefer? Can you please come forward for the final affirmation?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for such a rich live conversation in the chat. As I mentioned, there was a lot of outrage. There was just a lot of people dropping facts. There are people sharing comments and ways that they practice their traditions and ways that they do their affirmations. So I really appreciate all of what you share in the chat, and we want to keep that dialogue going. At this time, we'd like to end with one of the oldest prayers found in the Reu Impertem Heru Enger, the book of coming forth by day to day from night, excuse me, and it's called the Amasu. So if we could stand in a pose of adoration, we will say it in the language of our ancestors first and then repeat it in English. Amasu en Panter.
Amasu en Panter.
Sauksu.
Sauksu.
Ementra.
Ementra.
En Panter.
En Panter.
Autu.
Autu.
Aura.
Aura.
Maketipa.
Maketipa.
Herura.
Herura.
Give yourself to the One Most High. Keep yourself daily for the divine, and do it tomorrow just as you did it today. Twao Inter.
Twao Inter.
Thank you to the divine, and thank you to all of you. Thank you also for your donations. Wow, many of you sent us donations via Cash App, via PayPal. We saw stars on Facebook. You can continue to do so as you wish. We really appreciate all of the donations that you sent to us.
Dua. And I'm really hoping that you have a continue. Oh, I knew it was going to move. I really hope that you continue to have an amazing day, that you continue to do the sorts of things that you must do as those who are emissaries of the ancient African traditions. I'm really, really hoping that we take up this issue as well. With that, I say the divine force in me greets the divine force in you. Go forward and have an amazing Sunday and do the work of our ancestors. Shem and Ma'at, go forth in divine balance.